Welcome to Your Creative Chord Podcast, where host Jenny Leigh Hodgins, author and educator, shares unique insights dedicated to empowering your creative flow and inspired living. Through solo reflections and dialogues with creators and wellness experts, Jenny Leigh shares holistic wisdom influenced by her Buddhist practice, alongside poetic insights and practical strategies for living authentically. This podcast helps you overcome challenges and unlock your full creative potential.
I'm Jenny Leigh Hodgins, a pianist, composer, music educator, poet, author, and creative empowerment coach. I've helped thousands of music students, creatives, and burned out individuals rebuild creative trust, restore energy, and reignite their joy. My work draws from 4 decades of Buddhist practice and a lifelong career in creative education and performance. If you're feeling burned out, blocked, disconnected, or creatively curious, especially if you're exploring, reigniting, or struggling to focus on your creativity, I'm here to help you rebuild trust in your unique creative process so you can move forward with clarity, compassion, and a sense of creative alignment. My Creative Empowerment Sampler offers encouragement and tools from my full Creative Empowerment Coaching program. Creativity isn't a luxury. It's a vital, renewable source of energy, healing, and joy. Get your free sampler and explore more at yourcreativechord.com/get inspired here. Welcome to Your Creative Chord Podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Leigh. I'm excited to have a special guest today, singer-songwriter, creativity coach, and host of the Creative Engagement Podcast and YouTube channel, Dan Mandel. Dan empowers others to approach life with imaginative play and curiosity, especially during personal transitions like retirement. Dan refers to himself as a chief encouragement officer and supports people in using creativity not just to make art, but to live more meaningfully and with a deeper sense of adventure. Dan's philosophy is a beautiful synergy with Your Creative Chord's mission to empower your creative flow and inspired living. And I've enjoyed Dan's Creative Engagement Podcast. In fact, I was featured as a guest for his recent episode that aired on July 31, and I can vouch for his passion for curiosity-led creativity and storytelling. His songwriting background and exposure to new experiences through world travel gives him a distinctive lens on the creative process. I'm really looking forward today to learning more about how Dan helps people reframe creativity as a powerful tool for self-discovery and problem solving. So let's get started. Welcome to Your Creative Chord Podcast, Dan.
Thank you so much. Thrilled to be here. We are so well aligned. I love it.
Yes, it's fun to meet your people. I'm so glad to have you here and to explore your approach to creativity and coaching. So let's begin for our listeners with a little context on your background and creative path. Can you share a little bit about your path as a musician and coach and how you came to see creativity as a tool for personal growth and problem solving?
Yeah. So my background is I have probably been writing songs since I was a young teenager. And then I started a college study. I thought I was going to be a music major. And then it didn't feel quite right, and it didn't match up with the pressures of being a money-making, productive citizen. Sort of, had a meandering, organic path to eventually a corporate career in finance and management. And pretty quickly, I hit upon a work-life balance that I viewed my corporate work as funding my creative output. I remember that I would go on vacations and I would go to beach destinations. I would go to the beach and really not have that wonderful of a vacation. Like, it was fun to be out in the beach, but then I got invited to this artistic retreat, and it was in France, and it was a big deal for me to go out of the country and traveled to another country that spoke a different language. This vacation retreat it lasted probably a little bit more than a week, maybe 9 days. And I just remember like it felt like I was there for 2 months. Each day had so many rich experiences. And so that really set me up for after that. I wasn't satisfied with a typical beach vacation. So I started seeking out these opportunities to explore artistry and creativity and music and co-writing. And then that really led me into an experience of, a work-life balance where by day I was this corporate, manager maintaining banking websites. And then by night or on the weekends, I was writing songs and collaborating and really exploring creativity. Over time, people started using this word and like, hey, could you coach me through like how do you do this? Even at work, the word coach became part of the vocabulary. As a manager, I was coaching the staff. And so then I thought like, what is this thing about life coaching? Like I've heard that term. And then I thought, well, maybe I should explore that. And that became like a wonderful, like, oh, like I have skills that really are suitable for life coaching. And then I learned even more and more lessons about what is to be a really good coach. What does it mean to be a good listener? And it really deepened me into these things that I had some skills at, but I was really learning more and more how to be an encouraging spirit for other people.
That is such a beautiful story. And it's interesting to me that other people helped you see your coaching skills before you even saw that yourself. It was a natural extension of your skills as a coach. I love how you segued from approaching music and deciding that majoring in music and following that kind of route to exploring creativity wasn't a fit for you. And what a solid, wonderful path you laid with the best of both worlds, the solid corporate financial stability paired with exploring whatever you want to explore. And any creator, I'm sure, would be excited to hear about the trip to France and a retreat in engaging with other artists. I've heard, because I listen to your podcast, Creative Engagement, and I hear you talking with various guests about the fact that you've actually met many of them at artist type retreats and travels that you've made around the world. So I'd love to hear more about how your experience as a world traveler influenced your songwriting and your own creative expression. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Oh, yeah. It's been just the most wonderful. I use the word adventure a lot in my work with reframing retirement as seeing it as an adventure. I don't know that my mom explicitly ever like sat me down and said, here's a life philosophy, but I got from her this idea that the more you can see your life as an adventure, the more it reshapes your attitudes and the way that you can approach life. And it just makes your life feel better. And I have seen that. And not every second of my life is an adventure. There are some very mundane aspects, but a lot of world travel has been scary, challenging, weird. I've made some stupid choices that I had to then recover from. I had to learn how trains work and how to read a train ticket. These artist retreats that I went to were sort of cross-disciplinary. So it wasn't just singer-songwriters. It was actors and dancers, sculptors and painters and healers and all different stripes of artists. And so my work-life balance, I got to sort of see the contrast with other people's work-life balance choices and their choices. Some people chose paths where they made a living primarily from their art. And I saw how that shaped their choices, and it was different and I saw that in my work-life balance, I had more freedom to write songs about anything at all that came into my mind. I wasn't necessarily beholden to what would make money or what was being asked of me that might make money. I think it's not always a good idea to compare yourself to other people, but I did see there were a lot of lessons, sometimes cautionary tales, sometimes like real deep lessons. I learned a lot about discipline along the way, but I'm very, very slow to appreciating and really actually learning the lessons of discipline. It's only very recently that I've sort of dug in and thought, okay, I need to really address my resistance to discipline and my growth as a learner. And so like even meeting you, that was part of so this is what it really means to learn lessons of discipline about how to be a piano player, how to be a guitar player, how to be a singer. And so I'm really, really appreciative of discipline and practice.
Love that. Even all the influences of the different artists and artistry that you encountered in your travels have come full circle to helping you address certain aspects of your own creativity that you want to further explore and improve upon. And I love that you frequently refer to work-life balance. That seems to be a theme with your coaching approach and I know that you help people in the transition of retirement as well. And that's a wonderful thing to think about, whether you're an overworked, overwhelmed creative or someone having to do it to meet a commercial bar or standard or to create something that someone else wants, and also balancing that with your own kind of sense of adventure. And I love that you have that attitude toward creativity, the sense of adventure. You certainly have been living that with all of your travels and the way that you weave that in with your podcast guests. And I want to share a quick, can totally relate to going to different countries. I lived in Japan for 5 years, and I remember I didn't know how to speak Japanese when I went. And so I remember very vividly, going into the grocery store and seeing items of food that I had never seen before and can't read it, and I remember getting mixed up on a train ride and going like 2 hours the wrong direction before I finally figured out. But I learned very quickly simple things like how do you find the bathroom? How do you find the exit? Which way is a direction, and how to read signs, and what kind of food is where in the stores. But the reason I bring that up is because your mention of a sense of adventure. Wow, going to different countries really is an adventure. And it's research backed that when we try new things, that will definitely inspire new ways of thinking and new creativity. But as you're experiencing, like you just mentioned, now you're coming to kind of a self-reflection, and years later, through all these experiences, it's kind of accumulating into how to address discipline, which is a thread that you saw in lots of the artists that you encountered. Are there any particular places or cultures you've encountered that have really shaped your personal musical voice or your storytelling approach or even your coaching approach?
Well, I haven't been to that many different countries, mainly to France and the UK.
More than I've been to.
I did recently go to a co-writing workshop in Greece on the island of Crete. So that was amazing to see that. But I would say that particularly in Scotland and Ireland, they have this gathering that they call this word Paley. I don't know if you've heard of that word before, but it's sort of like their version of a block party. And there's this expectation that people are going to be sharing songs and poetry. Maybe there would be dancing. There's usually going to be singing, probably also drinking and chocolate. I've always wished that there would be more of that in the States, that there would be more a sense of like, hey, if you have
Communal.
a song.
It's kind of communal.
Yeah. And not such a barrier to, I think in the States, there's more of a professionalism culture or credentialed culture where if you're going to sing a song, well, are you a singer? Are you professional? Where have you gigged? Are you on par with Elton John and Taylor Swift? If not, then why are we listening to you? In these older cultures, you get more of the folk aspect of, isn't it beautiful to share music? And not so much like, are you going to play perfectly? Also in Scotland, there is a lot of original folk music currently being written. So the indie folk scene is very alive. And that's probably also reflected in the Fringe Festival there. That's such a big cultural, internationally known arts festival that people expect original, innovative material is going to come out of. So that's very exciting. And so I've kind of let that shape me in that I feel very buoyed up by, isn't it fun to be original and innovative and do things that don't quite sound like the mainstream?
Love that. And to be authentically yourself in your expression, to me, that's the crux of what being a creative is all about. And I love that you brought in I call it communal, I guess, but it's a culture, the culture of the Scottish and the Irish to include as a part of their daily life. Americans in general, definitely, I agree that we've gotten away from that, but our roots are the Native Indians in America and the African Americans, the Black Americans. Culture and rhythm and music and dance and singing is deeply entrenched in those cultures. And we've unfortunately squashed it out of the culture in America. So singing those praises and bringing that back into the norm of experiencing creativity.
Yeah, I think you can see it really clearly if you think of, at what age do you stop having your kids' artwork on your refrigerator? When they're 5, when they're 6, when they're 7. But when they're 16, do we put up their artwork on the refrigerator? When they're 17, when they're 31? I think that there's more of a possibility for us to keep being creators and keep play in our lives throughout. And we don't need to be squashing it so much. Really, as you and I know, because we've been paying attention to creativity and innovation and play, those things make us better workers, better citizens, better partners, better family members.
Better people. So bearing all of that in mind, how would you describe your incorporating that in your typical songwriting process? And how do you balance feeling inspired or getting inspiration with discipline, as you mentioned, in creating new music? How do you incorporate those, or what's your process like?
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. I don't know that I have a consistent process. I do go back to incorporating the wisdom that I've learned about practice and discipline. I go back to these messages that I got throughout the years of, how am I spending my day? That's how I'm practicing. So if I'm watching TV 5, 6, 7 hours a day, then that is my practice. And it's not necessarily like a judgment that TV is bad. You could make a case for that watching that much TV isn't good. But whatever we spend our time at, and that could be doom scrolling on a phone, it could be, but if we consider the time that we spend throughout our day, that is our practice. And if we start there and say, what do we want to be focusing our minds and our beings on, then that's a better way to say, how would you like your practice to be throughout the day? Over the years, I've more and more set up my life to have a practice around going to music to express myself and asking myself what wants to be expressed. And so that comes up very organically and strangely and almost dreamlike. I just recently published a song that I wrote with my brother, Mark Mandel, and he and I have written songs jointly together in different ways. This time I noticed I had a chord progression and I had some garbage lyrics so I guess it is a process for me. Like I'll come up with an interesting chord progression and I do I guess even the Beatles did this, is they would come up with an interesting chord progression. And so for this song, the word 17 kind of fit the rhythm. So I was singing about 17. And then I thought, well, I really don't have I don't know what this song wants to be when it grows up. I had just written a song with my brother, so I sent him the chord progression and I said, would you send me, do you have any lyrics? He has quite an interesting daily discipline of creating a painting and a poem, and he works very differently than I do, but has his own discipline. So he sent me some lyrics and I smushed them into place. And then I said, I think I need a chorus now that seems like you've given me some verses. Then he sent me some more lyrics and I created a chorus out of that. And then I said, I think I need a refrain now. So he sent me something, and back and forth, we had this collaboration.
That's so interesting that you approach it with really opening yourself up to what is the intent of this? What does this music want to sound like? That spirit of curiosity, and I think most really successful creators set that inner critic aside, and we set those comparisons aside. We even set, in some ways, discipline aside. In my case, those things to me are very much secondary to what you just described of tuning into what you're feeling, tuning into kind of being almost like a medium for the message to come through you, right? And I loved how you described how we spend our day is, what we're feeding ourselves is what's going to fuel what's coming out of ourselves creatively. So I agree that TV and scrolling and things can be good depending on how you want to use it. And I think it's very important to be intentional about how you use it. Exploring other people's creativity and ideas is research-backed and common disciplines that all creators use to fuel their own inspiration. And like your brother is one example of that. His words inspired you because he thought about it differently. So I think it's important that we can use anything basically to inspire ourselves. But your point of watching out, being kind of cognizant of how we're spending our day, that really resonates with me too. As a Buddhist, as an SGI Buddhist, it's cause and effect. What we're doing now is building what our future will look like. So I love that you're looking carefully at your discipline and how you're approaching that in your creativity, because you're growing that and you're growing in a new direction with that. I'm sure you feel that with the collaborations and the music that you're writing, right?
Oh yeah. And I've started actual piano lessons with a piano teacher.
What?
So I'm in that Jenny Leigh world of oh, okay. So now I get to really try out all the ideas around, okay, can I play this piece 3 times without mistake? And it's so fascinating as an adult learner to come back to how am I going to deal with the actual real frustrations? And I know that we talked about this when I interviewed you, but to really encounter the frustrations, I've learned in the past month or so that I need to remember to use the tools. So I need to remember to slow down. And it's so bizarre to me that I know how to slow down. That seems almost idiotic to say that. I can slow down, but it is surprising to me how slow I needed to go in order to learn to get the music in my fingers and make a connection between what I was reading and what I could play.
Right.
And that if I would just really go as slow as needed, that then I could later speed up and hear what the piece sounded like. But initially, I had to practice it so slowly that I couldn't even have a sense of what is this song.
Right. Yes. And I want to chime in too for listeners who don't know what he's referring to when he's in the world of Jenny Leigh. If you don't know, I taught piano and music for 30 years. And I had a piano Facebook group and some events that featured different educators. And I have multiple podcasts that are piano specific for new and returning learners because it's based on my Start Piano, What You Need for Successful Learning book. what Dan is referring to is the content that is shared on those episodes. It's about skill building if you are new or returning to the piano. And I love how you mentioned these are all disciplines. These are learning an art of how to play a musical instrument or any kind of creative expression. It does require that discipline. And I love that you mentioned going slow as idiotic. It may seem idiotic because in my 30 years of teaching, particularly teenage to adult students, I can't tell you how many people think that's idiotic because it seems like a no-brainer. But slowing down is itself not just related to piano, but in general, it's a discipline that as we learn, to slow ourselves down, we can start paying more attention to what's right in front of us. And I think that's a critical skill, not just for piano, but it's across many creative, modalities, that as we breathe and find stillness, it's really down to becoming mindful with one step at a time in front of us. That really does open up incredible listening skills. And when you can listen and you're able to find spots where you can improve. And that's where you, as a pianist anyway, that's where you evaluate where you are, what you need to do to change it, and then you attack that one thing at a time. But I love how you're describing learning piano skills as a discipline and how that fits into the full picture of being a creator and a coach. Obviously, you love piano and you love learning and you love music and creation. So you're mixing that blend of inspiration and the motivation that you naturally feel and want and that desire to improve yourself with now you're really honing in on your disciplinary training in certain aspects with creating new music as well.
Yeah. I love being able to demonstrate to myself that I can learn a new instrument, that I can apply these discipline techniques and then come out the other side and amaze myself. And
Yes.
now I've learned 3 pieces and I haven't read notation in years and years and years. And yet, even then, the next piece, the 4th piece that I'm going to tackle, I have to go back to remembering to slow down,
Basics.
separating my left hand and my right hand. And
Foundational work.
yes. And then in my practice, I've talked to my piano teacher about that this time around, as an adult learner, I really want to learn how to learn. I really want to make sure that what he's giving me is really kind of a breakdown of how to practice, what to prioritize, and how to be efficient with it.
Right.
And I have the willingness now to spend maybe an hour or more each day.
Wow, that's great.
Going through the things and how to make that fun.
Yeah.
And how to have the practice be an expected part of each day so that, like, if it doesn't happen, it's like, oh, that my day is not complete.
Yeah.
Done that.
Creating a practice is so critical and that's, it's foundational to really being successful at creating sustainably. You've got to have practices in place. What you just described to me is discipline. Learning how to learn, setting in place a practice so that you can learn how to learn. That's discipline right there. And you've just encompassed that. I love that. It's easy to doubt your inherent creativity, especially when life is busy or you're feeling burned out. I remember feeling completely stuck trying to write a commissioned song for a client's wedding. My inner critic kept telling me my musical style wasn't going to be feasible. I was completely blocked. But I leaned on my creative exploration formula, a simple roadmap I use for myself and my clients. I let go of expectations. I even gave myself permission to write the worst song possible. And as soon as I did, the words and music just burst forth easily. This is just one of the tools I share in my creative empowerment coaching program, helping you address your energy, overcome blocks, reconnect with your inherent creative voice, and move forward with clarity and confidence. If you're ready to rebuild trust in your inherent creativity and explore it without pressure, let's work together. Get started here, yourcreativechord.com/work with me.
The name of this retreat that I went to about 14 times over the years was called The Discipline of Freedom.
Wow.
It was that this really deep look across many different art forms and styles, how to be better artists, and the form and function of, are we at each point as free as we can be? And if we're not free in our voice, in our body, in our thoughts, in our mind, how can we achieve greater levels of freedom? It was a very rich exploration that just enhanced my life.
That's beautiful. Sounds wonderful. And for me, that's about not just play and curiosity, but being willing to be vulnerable, to really open myself vulnerably to, like you were saying earlier, to ask myself, where does this creativity want to go? What is its message? And just really honing in on that. To me, that's kind of a critical guiding point for any of my creative expression. You mentioned that many people see, and you seem to do this as well, see creativity as a kind of an exploration of curiosity or fun. But people often, as we've talked, maybe yourself included until this point, you've overlooked discipline and the growth that's involved that comes from disciplining yourself. How do you help people reframe practice and discipline with regard to creativity so it feels empowering and not like drudgery?
And I think it's reframing both fun and drudgery. Like, a lot of this work has shown me various ways to see my own mind. I think of this, you've probably heard of the idea of creating a mind map, and you keep going, and eventually you have a map of how your mind, visual map of how your mind sees a certain set of ideas. And if you keep going and you keep going, eventually you have a page full of circles and ideas that shows you your mind. And that's a fascinating way to get to know yourself. This idea of how do you spend an average day, thinking of that as your practice and starting to get to know your own mind. And like we were talking about, the difficulty of slowing down, the difficulty of bringing awareness to your present experience. I think that we all need to reframe this idea of boredom. Like, modern life, it seems like we're trying to orchestrate our whole life so that we're never, ever bored. If you're bored, you only have yourself to blame. You should be constantly entertained 24/7. And then even when you're sleeping, you're dreaming. So you're never bored.
There's no downtime.
No one should ever be bored. But in reality, boredom is an indicator of something is going on. And to judge that as always bad, I don't think that's the right framework. Sometimes we need our mind to have some downtime. There are people in this, there are articles written from a psychological standpoint about how gazing out the window and daydreaming is a part of our mind digesting our thoughts. Excuse me. And kind of letting space be and not sort of demonizing those downtimes and those bored periods. So I think that can affect things like why am I watching so much television? It's to combat boredom, to not face the presence of maybe things like loneliness. And so in my own life, I've learned some really deep lessons about what's the difference between living alone and being lonely. What's the experience of experiencing loneliness? And is that okay to experience? And boredom? I think that taking a deep look and getting to know ourselves is one of the rich aspects of reframing discipline. So I think no matter where you start, we're all very, very different. People come to me in coaching with various goals, things they either want to be doing that they aren't doing, or things that they want to stop doing that they are doing. There's no one path. So everyone has to find their own way in. And one of the main things that I've learned about coaching is I'm not there to necessarily figure out something or be an advice giver for whoever comes to me for coaching. It's more like I've learned over time that I need to be a master encourager and say, I trust that you will find your answer and your way in. And you need to find your own answer and your way in, because that's the way that you're going to fully invest and follow through. If it's from my advice, you might follow someone else's advice, but you probably won't. But when it's your own advice in your own way, you're much more likely to follow through, to be accountable to yourself. So those are some very important factors. And I don't take it as one size fits all. So I really explore. And there's a lot of creativity in, say, like, what's your way? What's your unique take on what will get you from point A to point B?
I like wonderful holistic answer there, because it really does reflect. I've heard some of your, I think you call them encouraging sessions. Encouragement sessions, sorry, where you literally coach someone through something, and your style is exactly that. Your style appears to be the ultimate listener, and you find ways to ask questions to draw out from the client or the person seeking change, to reveal to themselves what it is they're looking for or what it is that is blocking them. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that just giving people steps to do without really listening to them or helping them inquire within themselves, just like we do in piano practice, evaluating what the problem is, it's taking a moment to kind of step back and look at it. I love your approach to that. It does help people kind of reframe the drudgery of things, and also it helps people reframe, get away from the idea that they're not going to find it externally. They're going to find it internally. And I love that you're a guide for them to facilitate that process. Basically, that's how I've seen you in your coaching manner. And you also touched on something that I do. My coaching program focuses a lot on burnout recovery, or resetting your energy. And the idea of stillness, you talked about, we're trying to get away from being bored, and people scrolling and watching TV is just escapism or avoidance sometimes. And embracing that as a discipline to just be comfortable with sitting still, daydreaming, looking out the window, feeling and just acknowledging and noticing your feelings, and just questioning it and not trying to do anything about it, just sitting still enough that I notice this with myself, because we're in such a high-paced society, that when I finally sit still, and I'm practicing this a lot personally in my own burnout recovery, sitting still brings up for me so many things. And if I keep myself busy in whatever way, whether it's TV or work, engaging with socially or whatever, I'm avoiding it. I'm avoiding the growth and the joy and the creativity that can come from that. And in that, you talked about earlier how, the psychological studies and things that show this. I've interviewed a lot of creatives. I've interviewed experts. I've read tons of research and experts talking about what fuels creativity. And you hit the nail on the head. It's when we're able to be still and hear our own voices. And that's a practice that people are not accustomed to. That's why slowing down is challenging, because we have to learn to do that again, I think. But switching gears, what role do you think curiosity plays in sustaining a creative practice, especially when people are facing blocks, or they're losing motivation, or they're having trouble sitting still? How do you think curiosity can help with that?
That's a delicious question. Yeah. I think of curiosity as really like a superpower. And it's almost like a mysterious thing to explore. I don't know that you could necessarily package up curiosity and say, you can always be curious this way. I was exploring anger, and one of the, just like you've been talking, like all these things burnout. Each of these things has sort of a signature energy, and anger has a signature energy. And people have different relationships with anger, but in each person, you probably know when you're angry. You probably feel when your face feels flushed or your chest gets tight and your throat, you feel like you want to scream. And that signature of anger, I think what's interesting is anger is one of those emotions that, for me, represents the absence of creativity and the absence of curiosity. When I'm really, really angry, I'm very likely not curious about anything. And I'm definitely not feeling like, oh, let's be creative. I've been creating a course about how can we look at anger a different way and even create a score for an incident of anger. So we could really kind of analyze it. And so I was in that mindset. And then I had a leaky window during a storm and I got upset and I called a contractor to ask questions about how much will it cost to fix my window. And right away, he brought up several things that let me know that I did not know a lot about how buildings are built and how windows are constructed. And I noticed I got even more angry in the process. And then I had a little thought about the game Monopoly when you have a get out of jail free card. I thought, what if I could introduce just one question? Like, I don't have to be curious when I'm angry, but if I could have one question, one get out of anger free card, what question could I ask myself that would maybe make the conversation a little bit better or maybe help me work through my anger? And I don't know that I came up with a golden question at that moment, but just that thought helped me relax a little bit. And I think I asked the contractor, well, I don't know everything about building materials like you do. And if you were in my shoes, what would be the best way to make this decision? That's one way to bring some curiosity in. And so I noticed that even with anger, you can bring in just a little bit of curiosity. And this idea of a get out of anger or get out of upset question, like if you could just had one question, it really transformed my experience. And so I think that if we start to look at it like almost like you could dig a pit, that a pit big enough that you'd have to climb a ladder down into, just one question can sort of let you climb one rung of that ladder out of that pit and help you regulate your emotions, help you have a better experience.
Right.
And who wouldn't want a better experience when you get
Right.
so supremely angry that you might damage a relationship or yourself?
Right. Right. That is a great example of using creative curiosity to navigate an unexpected challenge, an unexpected emotion or a difficult emotion, and you can apply that to transitions. I love how you're approaching that. That is basically creativity in action. That's a great story to exemplify that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what really fuels your coaching work?
Yeah, I think that I really feel a lot of empathy for people who are suffering. And I know that I have I have suffered myself. I've had physical pain. I've experienced loneliness. I've experienced depression, especially the places where I've found healing or relief. Sometimes even distraction can be a way to move through or past something. And I really like to share that it's possible to make a shift or a change. It really is possible to recognize these different signatures of energy and choose the ones that you want to experience and diminish the ones that you don't want to experience or that are causing you suffering or problems.
I love that it really does resonate with my Buddhist mentor, Daisaku Ikeda said, hope is a choice. And what you're saying is it's a choice, and you have that choice to be able to make a change. It's a wonderful motivation for your coaching work. We've all experienced the same, kind of struggles. We all have the same exact feelings and struggles in our lives. So obviously we can empathize and we can work through it. If one person can do it, somebody else can. I love that your coaching work can give people hope to be able to make those changes for themselves. And so thank you for sharing that, and let us know where they can find you.
Yeah, so my music is out in all the typical places, Spotify, Apple Music, almost any of the streaming services. And you can always email me at coach@danielrmandel.com. DanielRMandel.com is my website. And then the podcast is Creative Engagement on all the podcast streaming services. And I just this year started a new YouTube channel, which is also called Creative Engagement.
Lovely, lovely. And I'll have all those links in the show notes so you guys can all find that easily. I want to thank you so much, Dan Mandel, for being my guest today. I deeply appreciate the insight that you've shared with us today and the encouragement you're bringing through your creative process, your coaching process, your creative engagement podcast, and through your coaching offers to people. It's very clear your passion for creativity as a tool for meaningful living. It really, truly aligns with what we celebrate here on your Creative Chord podcast. And thank you, dear listener, for hanging in there with us today. If today's episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it with a fellow creative or somebody ready to explore what's next in their life through the lens of curiosity and imagination. Thank you again for listening to your Creative Chord podcast. Until next time, may you keep empowering your creative flow and inspired living. See you soon. Feeling burned out, blocked, or disconnected? Or maybe you're creatively curious but unsure where to start? My Creative Empowerment Coaching Program helps you rebuild trust in your unique creative process. I use my inspirational bookmark trio as a practical roadmap to help you reset your energy, nurture your creativity, and overcome obstacles. You'll gain clarity, self-compassion, and actionable strategies to confidently explore and express your creativity. Ready to ignite your creativity? Visit yourcreativechord.com/work-with-me to learn more and sign up today.
Thank you for listening to Your Creative Chord Podcast. If you found inspiration in today's episode, please leave a review and subscribe to the show. Your support helps spread the message of creativity and inspired living. Stay connected with Jenny Leigh and a vibrant community of creatives and curious minds. Visit yourcreativechord.com for more resources. Remember, daily life is where your creative flow begins. Embrace the journey